This is Julia with iCadenza, and I'm here with composer Jake Heggie, who has composed operas for some of the major opera houses in the world, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you.
Thank you.
My first question for you is, how did you first discover composing? I know you're a pianist.
I first started composing, I was 11 years old. I had studied piano from about the age of 6 and loved it from the very first day, was just in love with music and never wavered. I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. When I was 10, almost about to turn 11, my father died very suddenly. It was a suicide, and it really blew the family apart. And I went deeper and deeper into music. I found such a place of solace and reflection where I could really explore myself and escape the situation that I felt was exploding around me, and decided that I wanted to try composing, and bought some manuscript paper from the money on my paper route and just started writing music. So it's from the time I was 11, and I never stopped after that. I felt good about it. It felt right to me.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself often writing about issues or current events?
I find myself inspired by current events, but what really motivates me is the psychological and emotional transformations that happen because of events. I think that's why I'm a theater composer. I do believe that there are a couple of different kinds of composers, and primarily there are theater composers and there are more soloistic composers who don't collaborate, who write, what they write. But in the theater, we write for the stage and for action, and it's very collaborative. You work with a lot of different people: the librettist, the conductor, the director, the actors, the choir. Everybody's involved, and you have to be willing to change things based on how they're playing or how they're reading. And I think I dove into the storytelling aspect of music, not only because I'm a theater composer, but just the combination of words and music and the telling of stories in this great art form of opera and song, these great art forms of opera and song, they really move me, they motivate me, they inspire me. I love singers, I love great writers, I love storytelling. I don't know, it was a natural fit for me.
And you're known for really working with the librettist in a collaborative kind of way. How do you approach that, and how do you choose people to work with in that capacity?
Well, if it's really true, and I don't know how some people miss this. If you do not have a really strong, cohesive, successful libretto, you will never have a strong, successful opera. Opera is theater, and it has to be strong from the very foundation. I was very lucky with the first opera that I did, Dead Man Walking, that I had the great Terrence McNally to collaborate with, because he knows the stage, he knows theater, he knows pacing, dramatic pacing, how to have things happen. Again, so things happen, and then there's a response, or you can tell that people want something, so they're motivated to express themselves. But what I find missing many times in new work is that the libretto is fundamentally flawed. And a composer might write great music, but if the libretto is flawed, you'll never have a great opera. You'll have great music in a flawed opera. So the idea always is to find a really wonderful collaborator who not only understands the stage and character development and all the things that you need for drama and theater, but also understands that opera has different requirements, and that there will be moments when we don't need any words, where music can tell that part of the story, or when we need to cut way back on words. Brevity is so important in a libretto so that the music can do its job and eventually lead. Because if the music doesn't lead, the opera, again, won't work.
I think a recent project like that for you was Moby Dick,
Yes.
which was actually commissioned by Dallas Opera. Can you talk about the process for composing that, which is based on actually a novel?
Yes, a huge novel. And it was commissioned actually by 5 companies. Dallas Opera was the lead, and that's where the premiere happened, but it was also San Francisco Opera, San Diego Opera, Calgary Opera, and State Opera of South Australia in Adelaide. So they'll all be doing it. But it was the Dallas Opera, Jonathan Pell, who first approached me about doing a piece. They were building the Winspear Opera House, and they wanted a new piece for the inaugural season. And I said, okay, as long as it's not the opening piece. You need to open with something tried and true. The star of the opening night is the Opera House. But I would love to be part of that first season and celebrate this new American Opera House. And at that time, I was working on a piece called At the Statue of Venus with Terrence McNally. And I said to him, this opportunity has arisen. Would you like to work with me? And he said, yes, but I only want to do Moby Dick. And I just had one of those moments where I couldn't imagine how it would be done. But when I looked in his eyes as a great man of the stage, I saw this smile and this twinkle, and I knew it was totally possible. And I thought, well, that's bold. And what is a new opera if it's not bold and dramatic and engaging, and immediately makes you go, whoa, how are you going to do that? And, you know, how are you going to stage it? How are you going to write that? How are you going to adapt that huge novel? So I got very excited, immediately had a great emotional reaction. And that's where it started. And then it was a matter of sort of figuring out what story we were actually telling, because there's many stories going on in Moby Dick. And then Terrence was not able to continue with the project, so Gene Shear came on board, and he and I worked very closely together for almost 3 years. 2 years of, well, a year and a half of really talking about it, developing the characters, figuring out the storyline, how that was going to work, everything that will work for the opera stage. In other words, forgetting about the terrible movies, forgetting about and even forgetting about the actual novel itself, just internalizing it, figuring out how are we going to do this for the stage. One of the first things we did was we knew Ahab was a Helden tenor, and it was Ben Heppner. So the first thing we did was ask, can Ben Heppner do the project? And he said yes, before anything had been written. And then it was figuring out voice types and figuring out casting, because even though I compose for roles and for characters specifically, I have to know who I'm writing for. What I was very proud of with the production team, the director and design team, is they didn't start really designing anything until they heard the music, so that everything sprung from the score, from how we were telling the story with words and music. And that was very moving to me, and it's the way it should be. Of course, that meant it was very harrowing for them right to the end, because the score was finally done sort of about 8 months before the premiere. So they had to work very, very quickly. But that's not atypical for how an opera goes. It was 5 years from the first call to the opening night. And so the big push was the last 2 years, but it's a big job.
What would you recommend to a young composer or also a young singer who's looking for a career in this industry? What are some of the best things that you did for yourself, and what are some of the things that you recommend singers do, having worked with so many?
First of all, you have to work really hard. You have to be really motivated. I have found through all my years that the most successful people have tremendous energy and motivation. They show up, they work hard. And you have to see things through. Even if something's really hard, you see it through. Don't just quit, you know? And look at every experience as a learning experience that you can grow from, and be a good colleague. Support each other. You know, one of the most destructive things in the world is professional jealousy, and especially in the arts. I find when you're truly happy and supportive of your colleagues, things will come back to you 100-fold. You know, and remember why you're doing it. Remember that this is a joyful thing, that you're leading an incredibly blessed life when you're in the arts. So stay grateful and stay true to what resonates in your heart. For singers, you have to just sing all the time. You have to look for every opportunity to sing. You have to show up at concerts. You have to go backstage. You be supportive for your colleagues. You work with young composers or established composers. Find out what resonates, again, as true for you. And for composers, if you're going to write an opera, ask yourself a few questions first. Do I love fiction? Do I go to movies? Do I go to plays? Do I love words? Do I love theater? And then how collaborative am I? You know, because there are composers who I don't think are supposed to write for the theater. They're not theater composers, you know? So I think those are very important questions to ask. But the only way you really learn is by doing it over and over and over again. And remembering that this is a really joyful thing that we're privileged to do.
Such wonderful advice. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Well, it's been so wonderful speaking with you.
Great to talk to you too. I'm sorry No.
It's been wonderful, and you have released so many wonderful offspring into the world that has frankly been judged really favorably by many critics. So I congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
We're so eager to hear what's coming next.
I am too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.